Well, as we mentioned earlier, Trump's nominations of Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. both got the green light to go to the full Senate vote today. So here to break it all down for us is Blaze News senior politics editor Chris Bedford. So Bedford, these were some close votes today. How did they both make it out of their respective committees?
With some last minute deals, some last minute pressure, some last minute threats, essentially, and some last minute wrangling, the kind of classic Washington style. And I'll get into that more in depth tomorrow to go through the Beltway brief, because I'm currently finishing a piece kind of laying out all aspects of this. But these nominees went into this week in trouble. They were unsure. When we were watching the first hearing, RFK's hearing, we didn't know until the moment the chairman, Cassidy, voted yes, which way he was going to vote. And at that time, immediately, his account sent out a tweet explaining it, all these different concessions that he claims to have been able to pull off from RFK. There's a lot of coping and a lot of seething that he then immediately went down to the Senate floor to explain himself, how basically Cassidy thinks that he's now in charge of Health and Human Services, not RFK, and he's going to oversee every aspect of this. We're going to make sure that there's no question of any of the medical science. It's really honestly shocking to see. But the point is he got through. And then just a short while later, I think the pressure had been building and building on Young from Indiana. Over the weekend, you'd seen Susan Collins, who was on the fence, confirm that she was going to vote for Tulsi Gabbard. That basically meant that even though they had, even though they had fought to ridiculously and preposterously keep their vote a secret, if she lost by one vote, everyone would know who it was. It wasn't Collins. She said she was going to vote that way. So now the pressure was suddenly on Young, and you saw him shift. And shortly after RFK went through, he sent out a tweet saying that he's been satisfied. He's happy with her answers. He's happy with the way things are going, and he's going to confirm. So we weren't allowed in that hearing. Some intel likes to keep things secret, but they're also extremely self-important. So their secretiveness extends apparently to how they vote. It's preposterous, but that's what they did. And Tulsi Gabbard came through, and now she's headed to the floor. And not everything is locked up for her on the floor, but which votes are going to go against her? McConnell will probably go against her. Murkowski might go against her. But both nominations are now set to pass, and Donald Trump's cabinet basically just has a few short pieces left before it comes together.
Chris, Axios is reporting that Democrats are planning to delay all of Trump's nominees because it's really retaliation for his plans to axe USAID. Is this real? Is this something they can do and are going to do?
They've basically already been doing it. Mm-hmm. So there's not really that much that they're adding. They've been dragging everything out through floor time, which is a fine tactic. Republicans do that all the time. Mm-hmm. So now they're claiming they're going to block the Department of State. I think that's strange messaging. When you say you're going to block America's diplomatic arm from being confirmed because we're not giving enough money to Nigeria, it's very blatant what the Democrats are standing for here, which is money for foreigners, not representation for the United States. Strange political play, but I guess that they want to do something. But they're already keeping things going as long as they can, the 30-hour window. So now they're just going to add a strenuous objection, I guess, to that window. At that point, it's going to come back on Senate Majority Leader John Thune. And what's he going to do? What he ought to do, what he probably should do if he wants to break this, is start introducing the nominations on Thursday morning. And then let the Democratic Senate decide how long they want to hold this up. If they want to keep this going, if that means they're going to be working 30 hours, it's going to be Friday and Saturday. I mean, in D.C., literally playing hardball can often mean just getting people to work on weekends. It's kind of shocking that it actually does force people to cave. It's considered insane. It's considered inhumane. Elon Musk was talking about it earlier this week with, hey, my secret weapon is I work on weekends and you guys don't. If Thune wants to play hardball like that, then he'll be able to get it.
All right, we had to get the news out of the way. So now let's get into the spotlight for today. It's downsizing the government versus properly utilizing the government for the MAGA mandate. Now, downsizing, we know Trump is going out there cutting everything. DOGE is cutting everything right now, trying to make the government more accountable. But we're not going to be able to get rid of everything, right? So how do you properly utilize the government, right? How do we get the smallest most efficient government that actually works for the American people, Chris?
Well, I think one of the ways, and this has been interesting, I never in my wildest dreams, nor anyone I know, expected what we've been seeing over these past 2 weeks to actually happen in my lifetime. It seemed like it would really just take an absolute crisis. And it turns out, I mean, gosh, if you're the Democrats, you've got to be sitting there just wishing you'd gone along with Donald Trump in his first term. I mean, a little bit. Like you didn't have to go along with him, but you also didn't have to try and put him in prison. You didn't have to try to do everything you can to rig every system in American government to getting you out of office and then try to shoot you. Like they went too far, and they created this Donald Trump, Elon Musk alliance that we're seeing today that is now back in Washington and doing these things. And, some friends of mine who are a little squishier on the subject pointed out, well, why can't you just cut the aid that's bad? Well, it's always hidden. It's covered. The reason why we saw that last minute order that's kind of been rescinded and tailored from OMB stopping outside payments is because they found out that the bureaucrats throughout the deep state were funneling the money out as fast as they could. They were sending it as fast as they possibly could to make sure that no matter what, they defended democracy by sending American taxpayer money to programs abroad, to America's enemies, and to left-wing activist groups. That's the way that these guys think. The only way to really stop them is with essentially blitzkrieg tactics. You got to use lightning strike. You got to shock and awe them. They can't keep up right now. They're talking about lawsuits. It's too late for a lot of this stuff. Layouts, leveraged buyouts of layoffs, leveraged buyouts of different people, cancellations of programs, NGOs that will not be able to sustain themselves because they exist entirely on the government. They feed entirely off the taxpayer that will collapse in the meantime. And then from there, you can start to rebuild. But taming the system, especially a system like USAID, which, let's be honest, is largely CIA affiliated, you can't just tame those sorts of things. They'll fight you every step of the way. It'll be constant leaks, constant undermining, constant fake articles about how somehow Putin wins if we don't do this or that. And you end up losing, you get stuck, and then 4 years later, maybe a Democrat comes in and it's all done. I've never seen this sort of progress. This is actually going to have an impact. And then from there, rebuild, because the old argument that conservatives should never use government power in order to defend Western civilization, defend our families, defend our country, is stupid that we fell for it as long as people did. And I think it's done now.
Yeah, that's your lips to God's ears. It's happening. May it continue to happen. Let's see more of it. We love it. We love it. But there is I think there's increasingly in the coming months and maybe even years, we're going to see this debate pop up because justifiably, what seemed impossible is the most important thing. What seemed impossible was you can't really get rid of anything in Washington ever. So if you can get rid of stuff, fantastic, right? We should be doing that as much as possible. But as you point out at the end, using power is still, that is what governing is. Governing isn't getting rid of the size of government and diminishing it. Governing is actually the wielding of power for the sake of the common good of all, for the good of the country. And so we want both. We know that this thing is bloated. We know there's a lot of evil. We know there's a lot of stuff, departments that really just have to go. You can't really salvage them. And so this is interesting for our audience to think about, I think, as we move forward. Where do you just slash and burn? And where do you what should some of these organizations be doing? So for instance, probably most people don't want to get rid of the FBI completely. That might be a good idea, right? It might not. But we have to talk about what the purpose of that thing is. Let me throw an example out that I've been thinking about lately, that maybe you could go either way on. That we could chat about, and that's take something that isn't really necessary but could do some cool stuff. So take like the artsy fartsy stuff that the federal government does, right? Which the right doesn't care about. So we had someone on here talking about the National Endowment for the Arts, right? Most of us know them as something that
Justin Schubo.
Yes, Justin Schubo is on talking about that and what could be done to promote the civic architecture in a good way, et cetera. But for most of its history, right, let's be honest, the NEA is most famous for Piss Christ and a number of blasphemous and terrible art from over the decades. Okay, so NEA. NEH, same thing, National Endowment for the Humanities. What are they doing? I mean, it's probably like basket weaving and diversity, I don't know. But They're not doing the interesting stuff. And you have the Librarian of Congress. You have a lot of posts, in other words, that have to do with America's history, with promoting beauty and knowledge. And I could see an argument that goes either way, right? This is why I bring it up. We could say, look, a lot of this stuff is just used from garbage, just get rid of it. And then you could see something like Justin was saying, like, well, hey, we need to institute an agenda that's actually about truth, goodness, and beauty.
I think he's right on that completely, because especially with these sorts of organizations, unlike USAID and others, they can be rebuilt fairly quickly. The next president could just start spending money out. And people who care about Western civilization ought to build structures that help conserve it, ought to fund art that helps conserve it. Justin Trudeau has worked a lot on expanding that to include Penn Station and the rebuild. I mean, Penn Station was one of the most beautiful pieces of architecture in the United States. You could fit Grand Central Station into its main lobby, and it was turned into what is frankly one of the ugliest structures in the United States, where you want to walk through it is to have sewage leaked on you and to look out in some kind of Mad Max dystopian idea of what America has become. Things like that should be lasting icons to what the United States and the West represent. Civic architecture, just the way that brutalism makes us look down to the ground and think that we're just ants, that we're just part of some kind of machine, that there's nothing that rises us up. Beautiful sculptures, beautiful public monuments. I wish the Eisenhower Memorial had been fixed. People worked on that pretty hard. These sorts of things lift the eyes up, ennoble the human spirit, remind us that there's something that we are fighting for, that there's life after death, that we're part of a civilization that extends before us and, God willing, will extend after us, that we're a link in that chain, and that this is something that should be valued. That government work even is something that ought to be noble and taken care of. The FBI headquarters, to absolutely demolish the J. Edgar Hoover building and build something beautiful and classical in its stead. And when the American people, I think, are reminded, because they don't like it, everyone prefers it, vastly prefer it. And we've been tricked. I think COVID's kind of finally changed this. And to letting the experts tell us that we're just ignorant, we're stupid, we need to read up some more. We don't realize that this ugly stuff is actually great. People aren't buying that anymore. So if you start to really build beautiful things, I think the people will follow.
All right, quickly, I have about 60 seconds left, but Ronald Reagan famously said that government agencies are the closest thing that we'll ever see to eternal life here on this planet. Well, we've now seen Donald Trump come through and say, hey, you know what? If you want to keep working, federal workers, go ahead. I'm not going to have any certainty that you're going to keep your job, or you can go ahead and take this payout and coast until September. Well, 20,000 workers so far, Bedford, have taken the payout. So what do you think this means for the government just moving forward?
20,000 have taken it, and their goal is 200,000. So you have to see pressure increasing on this. Investigations of people. Apparently, it's illegal if you're a federal employee to have secondary employment. Find out look at the people's taxes. Use the IRS. Find out who's been taking payments through Uber. Find out who's been doing things in the different gig economy. Now you've got cause. Keep on pushing. There needs to be a higher rate of attrition and turnover. And honestly, I live here in D.C. I'm ready to crash the housing market. Let's see. There's no reason why a 1970s three-bedroom house with 3 bathrooms that's a ranch should be $850,000, half an hour outside of D.C. But it is because of this insane government largesse that we exist in. That taking a big step to that and then asking permission later, that's what separates this from any previous Republican admin and makes it a lot more in line with using power, what we saw from Barack Obama and Joe Biden.
I love it. Today we get the DC housing prices. Yesterday we got all the DC traffic patterns from Bedford. He is our DC insider. Absolutely. And who knew that we were going to get all this information too?